on to a story that I'm still up in the air about.
Tamar Braxton, Mendeecees, and the missing teeth. This moment doesn't begin with yelling. It opens with uncertainty. A pause, long, uncomfortable, and heavy in a way anger never is. The camera is already rolling. The host leans in, eyes focused, voice controlled but clearly strained. He admits he's torn about how to even handle this story. Not because the facts are confusing, but because the version being presented doesn't feel right. Something about it doesn't sit well. He says he hasn't decided how to respond to Tamar just yet. That hesitation lingers as he shifts to her recent interview. He barely replays it. He doesn't have to. One clip says enough. Tamar claims she doesn't know what truly happened to her. She describes a night that starts off ordinary. A gathering, people heading home. But the story stops before it reaches clarity. There are no explanations, only consequences. And that's where the tension breaks. The host turns away from the footage and speaks directly to her. His voice sharpens. He accuses her of doing the bare minimum, saying just enough to raise eyebrows without offering real details. Enough to fuel rumors. Enough to set blogs on fire. Enough to let the internet write the story for her. And enough to later step back and plead ignorance. Then comes the line that blows everything open. He calls her a bold-faced, bald-headed liar. No hesitation, no softening the words. The accusation lands hard. Within minutes, social media erupts. Some say she's protecting herself. Others insist she's completely rewriting the night. Hovering above it all is the headline racing across the internet. Tamar Braxton claims doctors confirmed a life-altering diagnosis after spending the night with Mendeecees. But here's the issue. None of that appears in the footage. No diagnosis. No doctor. No confirmation. Just a story looping around the same unresolved question. How does someone wake up injured, say they nearly died, and still claim they have no idea what happened?
I don't like that. I don't like that at all, because I'm telling you to your damn face, you was a bold-faced, bald-headed.
The host starts tugging at that loose thread. The locations. The rides. Who stayed behind, who left early, who went upstairs, and who never did. As the internet divides itself into camps, one reality becomes harder to dismiss. If Tamar claims she has no memory of what happened that night, someone else is convinced she does. And according to him, the truth isn't lost. It's being deliberately sidestepped. Once the accusation lands, the story slows. That's when the real unease settles in. Because after the insult fades and the anger burns off, what follows isn't disorder, it's reconstruction. A meticulous step-by-step retelling of a night Tamar says she can't fully recall, delivered by someone who insists he remembers every moment. He begins by dismantling the framing altogether. According to him, this was never about Tamar hosting a birthday celebration for a friend. He calls that version false from the outset, not confused, not misinterpreted, but outright untrue. And the rejection feels personal. Not because of public image, he says, but because it inserts him into a narrative where he doesn't belong. He dismisses the birthday party angle completely, saying he never liked it. What he lays out instead is ordinary, almost deliberately plain. A group of people searching for food, phone calls made, restaurants already closed, a casual suggestion to meet at a familiar steakhouse. He stresses how unremarkable it all was, as if trying to drain the night of any special meaning. Later, Tamar herself would imply there were no party decorations, no signs of celebration, just people passing through the evening.
You went to throw a birthday party for a friend, and this friend did you so wrong. That's not right, Tamar, and it's not fair to me and my feelings.
He places himself squarely in that timeline. Then he says Mendeecees shows up unexpectedly, arriving with someone else. He doesn't accuse. He doesn't assign labels. He simply highlights the timing. This was only the third time they had all spent time together, and suddenly a new presence shifts the atmosphere. From there, the night keeps rolling forward. Another stop. Then another suggestion. A spot called Sauce. He says he didn't even want to go, an insistence he repeats because to him it matters. He wanted to head home. Instead, he drives himself anyway, reluctantly going along until the plans change once more. That's when he says Tamar suggests leaving the car.
With the relationship that you and Mendeecees had in front of me, okay? All of that, you at the music video show in your booty shorts, sitting on top of him meeting us up at restaurants every time we met up, I was very uncomfortable with it. And tell it upstairs with Tamar when we got back to her house, because after her and Mendeecees got through kissing in the back of that goddamn car, I figured they wanted to be up there privately. That is why when we got dropped off at Tamar's house, I did not go upstairs. I got in my damn car and went home because you was sitting on his lap in that goddamn Uber and y'all
leaving the car at her house so they could head somewhere else together. By that point, the story isn't explosive. It's procedural. Who drove which vehicle? Who rode with whom? Yet the pressure keeps building because every logistical detail is being used to challenge something Tamar later suggested in public. He circles back to that theme again and again, implication without outright accusation. He stops and asks why she would present the night as though she had gone out of her way for a friend, only to be betrayed afterward. He calls that framing unfair, not merely incorrect but unjust. He admits it hurt his feelings, a rare moment of vulnerability cutting through the anger. He positions himself as collateral damage in a narrative crafted for attention. The version she put forward, he says, left him wounded. From there, the focus shifts from chronology to intent. He accuses Tamar of thriving on online disorder, of rushing to social media to spark confusion, of knowing exactly how to say just enough to ignite blogs without being cornered by details. According to him, this isn't new behavior. It's a pattern. He then points to the moment that became the centerpiece of internet outrage. Tamar's claim that she woke up surrounded by blood and nearly lost her life. She declined it, according to him, and those two facts cannot coexist. If someone truly almost died, why turn down emergency assistance? He doesn't claim that proves anything outright. He says it points to something else. And in the space between nearly died and no ambulance, the internet rushed in with theories of its own. At this stage, the focus tightens onto one relationship in particular, Tamar and Mendeecees. The host admits something he says he kept to himself for a long time. He was never fully comfortable with how they behaved around each other in his presence. He recalls moments that unsettled him. Public closeness, casual physical intimacy, frequent meetups. He says the dynamic made him uneasy, and he emphasizes that he's only speaking now because Tamar chose to reopen the story publicly. Once he does, he stops shielding anyone. He recounts the car ride back to Tamar's house. He says she was sitting on Mendeecees' lap. He says they were kissing. He says it made him deeply uncomfortable. That discomfort becomes central. His explanation for his own actions that night. When they arrived, he didn't go upstairs. Later, he says people questioned him for that choice, even accused him of being a bad friend. His response is direct. He didn't go inside because he believed Tamar and Mendeecees wanted privacy. So he got into his car and went home. This is where the narrative sharpens. He draws a firm boundary. He left. They stayed. And according to him, the only people who know what happened inside that house are Tamar and Mendeecees' friend. He doesn't pretend otherwise. In fact, he insists on the opposite. He says he genuinely has no idea what occurred. But he also insists that if anyone should know, it's the people who went upstairs. That's where his frustration peaks. He questions how Tamar can be precise when it comes to sneaking around, avoiding visibility, coordinating movements, yet claim total ignorance about what happened inside her own home. He frames it as selective memory, convenient uncertainty. Online, viewers immediately latch onto that contradiction. Comment sections fracture. Some argue trauma distorts recall. Others say the gaps feel intentional. Hovering over everything are the headlines spreading faster than the footage itself. Claims of medical confirmation, irreversible diagnoses, expert conclusions. Yet inside the actual transcript being analyzed, none of that exists. No doctor speaks. No test results appear. No diagnosis is named. What remains is accusation, resentment, and a demand for accountability, not from the internet, but from Tamar herself. He ends this portion by acknowledging something uncomfortable. He knows speaking this way makes him look messy. He knows people will accuse him of waiting for the right moment to air her business. He accepts that label if it means correcting what he believes is a false narrative. Because from his perspective, the real issue was never mystery, it was control of the story. And in his view, Tamar lost control the moment she claimed she didn't know what happened while quietly directing suspicion toward everyone else. Once that line is drawn, who went upstairs and who didn't, the story shifts. It moves away from speculation and toward responsibility. Not legal responsibility, but narrative responsibility, the kind that determines who the internet believes and who it targets. The host doesn't accuse Tamar of a specific act. Instead, he does something more unsettling. He points out patterns. He reminds viewers that long before this interview, there were moments that made him uneasy. Moments he chose to overlook because he believed friendship required silence. He now admits that silence may have been a mistake. He revisits how often Mendeecees appeared during nights out. Not once. Not accidentally. Repeatedly. Restaurants. Music video sets. social spaces where proximity wasn't subtle. According to him, this wasn't one strange night. It was part of an ongoing dynamic that people around them noticed but never confronted. Then he addresses the moment that turned public opinion against him. When Tamar went online and claimed she woke up injured, disoriented, and nearly dead, the internet immediately began searching for someone to blame. He says he watched it unfold in real time. He watched people assume he knew more than he was saying. He watched comments stack up demanding explanations, specifically from him. He says he stayed quiet because he truly didn't know what happened. He left. He went home. That was the truth. But the longer he stayed silent, the louder the theories grew. People waited for him to explain a night he wasn't present for. What bothered him most, he says, wasn't just the suspicion, it was the imbalance. Tamar went online and released fragments. Enough to imply danger. Enough to suggest wrongdoing. But never clarified who was actually with her when things went wrong. The result was predictable. Everyone else became suspects by omission. He challenges that logic publicly. If someone truly woke up injured and confused, wouldn't the first step be to find answers? Contact authorities. Ask questions. Seek clarity. Instead, months passed. Interviews were given. Narratives shifted. Yet the central question remained untouched. Why speak before investigating? That question becomes the backbone of this section, where empathy and skepticism collide. Supporters argue trauma changes behavior. Fear silences people. But others point out that Tamar showed no hesitation when discussing the aftermath online. Only the cause remained off-limits. The host takes that contradiction personally. He says the way the story was framed made him collateral damage. He became the messy friend, the one accused of failing her, while the person who actually stayed with her that night was barely mentioned at all. He makes a striking admission. He says he knew people would eventually accuse him of being cruel, dismissive, even misogynistic based on his later language. He accepts that criticism, but insists context matters. He explains that his detachment came from certainty that nothing catastrophic happened that night in the way the internet was led to believe. He doesn't deny she was injured. He denies the mystery surrounding it. To him, the mystery was constructed. That's where the conversation ends. He briefly touches on the medical aspect, not diagnoses or test results but recovery. He references a video posted by someone else that allegedly showed Tamar's injuries. He calls it misleading, says no one with that level of trauma heals that quickly. He doesn't cite doctors. He cites common sense, the kind audiences either accept or reject based on loyalty. The audience fractures further. Some accuse him of minimizing her pain. Others accuse Tamar of exaggeration. The comments turn into a referendum, not just on what happened but on who controls truth when public figures collide. And looming over everything are the headlines racing ahead of the facts. Claims of confirmed diagnoses, doctors speaking, irreversible consequences. Inside the actual footage being analyzed, none of that appears. What exists instead is resentment over being pulled into a media storm without consent. He says Tamar doesn't get to drag other people into chaos, then retreat behind vagueness. He frames it not as a moral failure, but as a violation of boundaries. He admits something else here, quieter but revealing. He says he asked Tamar to stop engaging with him long before this interview ever happened. He asked her to leave him alone, to stop referencing him indirectly, to stop igniting conversations she had no intention of completing. According to him, she ignored that request. He says he was clear. And that refusal, he explains, is what finally pushed him to speak. Not to expose her. Not to defend himself. But to correct a version of events he believes was deliberately misleading. He briefly shifts focus to the one person he says truly suffered because of all this. Yandy. He states plainly that she was the only one wronged in the situation. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't dramatize it. He leaves the statement hanging, sharp and unresolved, especially heavy given everything already circulating online. That line reignites another wave of backlash. Some accuse him of deflection. Others accuse Tamar of recklessness. Still others blame the blogs themselves for turning implication into supposed confirmation. As this section closes, one thing becomes unmistakable. This was never about proving what happened upstairs. It was about who benefited from not explaining it. And as long as the gaps remain, the internet will keep filling them, whether the truth fits or not. By this point, the commentary loses its emotional volatility. It becomes cold, controlled, almost forensic. The host isn't shouting anymore. He's placing pieces on the table and challenging the audience to examine how they align. He talks about how quickly the internet decided what the story meant before ever determining what actually occurred. Once Tamar spoke publicly, the narrative locked into place. Injury, mystery, near-death language. Viewers didn't wait for clarity because clarity slows emotional payoff. According to him, the public doesn't sit with unanswered questions. It fills them. And once filled, those conclusions become rigid. He describes watching the narrative evolve in real time. First came concern, then sympathy, then outrage, and finally accusation, not directed at evidence but at proximity. Whoever was closest to Tamar became suspect. Whoever spoke the least became guilty. Whoever tried to correct the framing was labeled cruel. He says the internet doesn't reward restraint, punishes it. That's why, in his view, Tamar's statement, "I don't know what happened," became a shield rather than a question. It allowed the audience to project whatever explanation best matched their emotions. For some, that meant trauma. For others, conspiracy. For others, still a cover-up. And all of it unfolded without Tamar ever being pressed to clarify who was actually present when things went wrong. The host points out that this wasn't a single media moment. Tamar didn't speak once and disappear. She gave interviews. She referenced the night indirectly. She allowed the story to linger without anchoring it. Each time the same pattern repeated, aftermath without cause. He argues that trauma does not excuse narrative carelessness, especially when other people are being pulled into the blast radius. He reminds viewers that he explicitly asked to be left out, not quietly, not privately, clearly. He did not want to be part of whatever this story was becoming, and yet his name remained attached. He explains how that happened. Tamar never accused him directly. She didn't need to. The ambiguity did the work for her. When she said she woke up injured and didn't know why, the audience automatically scanned backward through the night looking for suspects. He had been there earlier, so he became relevant. He calls that maneuver familiar, not accidental, a way to spark conversation without owning consequence. He slows the narrative again and walks through the aftermath, not of the night itself, but of the story that followed. The calls, the messages, the assumptions, people demanding explanations he didn't have, people criticizing him for not expressing concern publicly, people deciding that his refusal to perform concern meant he was hiding something. That, he says, was when he realized silence was no longer neutral. The internet doesn't interpret silence as restraint. It interprets it as guilt. That realization, he admits, is what pushed him to speak the way he did. Blunt, angry, unapologetic. He knew the tone would cost him sympathy. He accepted that trade-off because, in his view, sympathy was already gone. What mattered now was the record. He wanted it documented that he left. That Tamar was not alone. That the people who stayed upstairs were known, and intentionally unnamed by her. That he did not benefit from confusion. He then addresses the most volatile layer of the story, the one dominating headlines and thumbnails: medical certainty. He does not say Tamar is lying about her health. He does not deny she received treatment. What he says is more precise. None of the certainty being circulated online exists in the material under discussion. No doctor appears. No diagnosis is stated. No confirmation is quoted. Those claims, he argues, are interpretations stacked on top of implication. He warns viewers about how dangerous that stacking becomes. Once the word confirmed enters the conversation, evidence becomes secondary. Emotion outruns fact. And the person at the center no longer has to clarify, the audience does it for them. He suggests Tamar understands this dynamic better than most. She's lived inside media cycles long enough to know how rumors harden, how suggested becomes said, how I don't know slowly transforms into they did this to me. That's why, in his view, the real conflict isn't about what happened upstairs. It's about who took responsibility for how the story traveled afterward. He acknowledges that some viewers will dismiss his words as bitterness. He anticipates that reaction and doesn't resist it. Instead, he reframes the issue. If Tamar truly didn't know what happened, why was there no urgency to find out? Why no investigation before interviews? Why no attempt to shut down speculation before it hardened into certainty? Why allow others to absorb blame while claiming confusion? He doesn't answer those questions. He lets them linger. For him, the absence of answers is the answer. He returns briefly to Yandy, not to expand, not to sensationalize, but to remind viewers that consequences ripple outward. Even when a story centers on one person's pain, it never exists in isolation. Marriages, friendships, reputations, all absorb impact whether they consent to it or not. That, he says, is why this situation can't be reduced to sides. This isn't about believing Tamar or believing him. It's about recognizing how narratives are shaped once they leave private spaces. How ambiguity becomes a tool. How outrage becomes currency. and how truth becomes optional when emotional payoff is high enough. As this section closes, the tension doesn't resolve, it sharpens. Because the audience is left with a problem the internet hates. There are no clean villains. No clear heroes. Only people who spoke and people who didn't. And a story that grew louder every time clarity was avoided. And the longer the gaps remain, the more permanent the assumptions become. By this point, the argument is no longer about interpretation. This is ultimately about consequence. The host isn't asking anyone to switch sides. He's explaining why, once a story reaches a certain speed, no one involved escapes unmarked. He describes how the media storm didn't just expand, it solidified. What began as uncertainty hardened into certainty, not because new facts emerged, but because repetition replaced verification. Headlines echoed one another. Commenters cited other commenters. Rumors fed on themselves until emotion overtook evidence, and the story stopped being about what was actually said and became about what people felt had to be true. That, he argues, is where the real damage occurred. Tamar's refusal to clarify stopped being neutral. Silence shifted from self-protection to permission. Permission for blogs to speculate, for audiences to assign blame, for narratives to form without her fingerprints on them. He reminds viewers that he never claimed to know what happened upstairs. He never filled in that gap. He never denied her injury. What he rejected was the idea that confusion alone removes responsibility once a story goes public. From his perspective, once Tamar chose to speak, once she framed the night as something done to her, she inherited an obligation to protect the people she knew would be implicated by omission. He says she didn't do that. Instead, the storm was allowed to spread outward. He reflects on how unsettling it was to watch himself become a character in a narrative he didn't write. His actions, leaving, going home, choosing distance, were reinterpreted as coldness or indifference. People demanded emotional performance from him, not accuracy. They wanted visible grief to validate a version of events he didn't recognize. He refused, and he understands why that refusal angered people. Online, empathy is measured by visibility. Silence is treated as rejection. Nuance is mistaken for hostility. He pushes back gently against the claim that his tone erased her pain. Acknowledging someone's suffering, he says, does not require endorsing every narrative built around it. Support does not mean abandoning reason. And friendship does not mean absorbing blame for events you weren't present for. He returns to the timeline one final time, not to repeat it, but to underline its permanence. He left. He went home. The people who stayed were known. Yet the public focus never centered on them. It centered on the easiest target. The one who spoke bluntly, the one who didn't perform grief correctly. That imbalance, he suggests, reveals how narratives choose their villains. He widens the lens beyond himself and Tamar. Stories like this don't just harm individuals, they corrode trust. Once implication replaces fact, relationships collapse under pressures they were never meant to withstand. Silence becomes evidence. Truth becomes negotiable. He accepts that he may be remembered as the messy one. He's made peace with that. What he won't accept is being rewritten as the villain of a night he didn't stay for. He stresses that incomplete stories are the most dangerous kind. They invite imagination, reward outrage, and punish patience. As this section ends, the tension doesn't resolve, it settles. Because once a narrative escapes into the public, truth no longer belongs to the people who lived it. It belongs to the people who consume it and decide what they need it to mean. Now it's your turn. Do gaps excuse responsibility once a story goes public? Or are they a form of control? Drop your thoughts below, and subscribe for deep dive breakdowns that question narratives instead of repeating them.